Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. Really happy New Year. And we are live streaming on so many different platforms. And we thank you for your time and attention. Today, I've actually got a very interesting guest for you today, Shanti Hershenson. And she is actually a teen author. She's actually written 26 books, 13 published. You can all check it out on Amazon in the links. And she is a prolific author, writer. And today's talk is going to be all about being prolific and talking about writing across genders, balancing act, leveraging social media. She's actually got over 50,000 followers on TikTok promoting her books and just life in general. So, as well as responding to the haters and the critics. So, Shanti, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I like to. This is a business podcast, and you've had success at such an early age. Most of my guests, they're in their 30s and 40s, but you've done it. You get it. So you're the generation that gets it. So talk about set the stage for what you do, your work, and we will dive right into the conversation.
Yeah, of course. So, obviously, my name is Shanti Hershenson, and I'm a teen author. Ever since I was 12 years old, I have been self-publishing professionally using Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing. And over the years, I've really established this online community and a pretty strong readership. It was not honestly what I was expecting at all. Just the more I wrote, the more I really wanted to share my stories with the world. And that kind of transformed into learning more about the business side and learning about marketing and promotion and advertising. And just from there, I've kind of just grown into this really cool career that I just want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And so what's interesting is I always love to ask authors and just people early beginnings, and what prompted you to just start becoming an influencer at an early age. Share with us what inspired you and what motivated you.
So I started writing my first book in the middle of the pandemic, and I was stuck at home and I was really, really, really bored and I had just nothing to do. And I was like, well, I want to create something. So I started writing this novel. It's called Biome Lock. It ended up being so long that it was split into 3 books, and the first 2 have been published. The third one is still in editing, and I don't really like those books because they're so old, and I feel like I've written so many better ones, but those were that's the beginning. And originally, I didn't even think I was going to publish it. What happened was, as I wrote, and I was putting so much time into the book that I was like, well, when I'm done, what am I going to do? And because, I really love writing, and even if there was no one to read my work, I would still write. But it is kind of a great feeling to have other people read it. So I started researching publishing, and then as I was writing, I would look into all the cool possibilities, and it just appealed to me more and more. And also, I didn't even know what to do, and I was so I started my Instagram account, and that was my first big kind of marketing thing where I would make these Instagram posts and I would try to promote my book. And I also noticed how TikTok was really rising among authors and readers, because this was now around, I would say, 2020, 2021, where book talk was becoming this thing. And that really changed the publishing industry. So I believe it was in July of 2021, and I was 13 years old, and I created my TikTok account. And I was really, for some reason, against TikTok for marketing. I don't know why. I just didn't think I could do it. I was like, oh, this is probably a bad idea. I mean, it's TikTok, it's a dancing app. But what I realized was actually it was one of the biggest things I've done. And that's currently my most followed social media platform. I have 60,000 followers on there. And I've met so many people through TikTok. I've had so many books just blow up. And honestly, it completely changed my career. But I was against it for so long. And just from there now, I've just learned all these new things about marketing. And I do a lot on TikTok. I do a lot on Instagram, but I'm also expanding too. And that's been really, really cool.
One of those things is you mentioned is basically I mentioned that the young generation millennials started the trend, but the Gen Z and now Gen Alpha, they just get it. They understand that a job's not going to be there, government's not going to be there, Social Security is not going to be there. So you have to go onto these platforms to, promote yourself and, influence people and build your community and your tribe. So share some insights on how social media, particularly you mentioned TikTok, but, there's others as well, can be effective tools for authors to market their books and connect with their audience.
So I think TikTok is there's a really good variety of people like on TikTok. For example, I've seen there's like adults on TikTok, but the main demographic is teenagers. So for me, I write a lot of young adult books, and of course, my ideal reader probably has TikTok. And then what I can do is I research a lot of trends. I look at what other authors are posting and I see what kind of books are trending. And that I would say that doesn't affect what I write too much, but it does affect how I promote it. Where, for example, if one of my books has a romance plotline in it, maybe that's not even like the main focus of the book, but if there's romance in it and romance is what's trending, then I can make videos promoting that part of the book. Or one thing that's really, really popular on TikTok is like the aesthetic of books. And you just get a bunch of images from Pinterest and you have them move really fast and you kind of show like the tone of your book. And I don't know if that's still as popular now as it was in 2021, but of course you can do that with literally any book. It doesn't have to be a romance book. It doesn't have to be a fantasy book. So really being able to like research what's working and what the audience likes. And I think TikTok really allows you to do that really nicely. Otherwise, what you can do is you can just post a bunch of different kinds of videos. For example, one thing I do is just general TikTok trends. It doesn't even have to be about writing. It can be anything. And I try to make it about my book somehow. And sometimes that's really tricky and sometimes it's really easy. Of course, I can't do a TikTok dance holding my book. I feel like I've seen that actually. I don't do TikTok dances though. But there's other things you can do where if there's a trend where you're like telling a story, you can like tell the story of your book, if that makes sense. And then otherwise, just making a variety of posts, then you can see like which ones do really well. So for example, I noticed that there's a type of post I do where I like share like how many books I've read and my age, and then I share what the video is about. So for example, the video I posted last night was like, I'm 16 years old and I'm preparing to publish my 17th book. This is the like official synopsis. And that's a kind of formula that really like hooks people in. So really like what you have to do as an author or really any like person who's like in business and you want to promote on TikTok is you just have to see what's working with your audience and then just what's working with like TikTok in general.
Yeah, one thing is I noticed about the younger generation is they're able to leverage technology and kind of they're able to get these micro trends and these they're basically really fast paced information. Everything's moving at Twitter speed, and they're able to leverage that for marketing and promotion and more visibility. Which also brings me to my next question is because now teens and people in their 20s they figure out TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, all these platforms, and some of the questions I get from my colleagues' kids are they don't want to waste $500K on education. They can leverage their experience. So what is your plan in terms of further education? Are you planning to do other things, or are you going to be a influencer creator because you've had so much success early on?
I definitely really want to balance both because I think going to college and getting a degree is something that's really helpful in case, also it's like something you can fall back on, but it's also like the experience I really want. I do think when I go to college, I'm going to study something writing related, whether it's like creative writing or screenwriting. I also really like screenwriting and like writing films, so I'm not as good at it as I am with novels. But I don't know if I would ever major in English because it's just a lot of like reading and I like to read, but I don't like reading the books they assign for school, if that makes sense. But I do think like creative writing, because there's always something you can learn. Like, for example, I took a creative writing class my freshman year of high school, and I was like, well, I already know a lot about writing. I don't know what I'm going to learn. And then I end up learning like a lot from it. So I think that's definitely a class that I would take in college and potentially major in. But I do really, want to stick with this and stick with like the marketing and the social media as well as like, going to school.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I was talking to Sal Khan one time. He was giving a talk at Rice, and I was, we were talking about future of education because now you can get Khan Academy, YouTube, podcasts, all this information. But he said the value of the education, what you said is the network and the environment you surround yourself, and you're around these like these fantastic cutting edge ideas, and that may be and you're in these networks, and that may be the value of it's like basically you're paying to get in these networks. So the other question I have is because I've leveraged AI, but how are individuals, creators in your generation thinking about ChatGPT, generative AI? How are they planning to use these? I want to get my pulse on what the younger generation is doing.
I know a lot of people use AI to like, help them with their homework. I try not to do that because I don't want it to take away, my like ability to think. But at the same time, I think there are really good ways you can use AI.
Mhm.
There was something I did the other day. I'm trying to remember because I did use it like effectively in a way that's not like kind of, stealing it, like not, taking away like my ability to think.
Yeah.
But you can definitely use it maybe. One thing I did is I actually just for fun, I had it try to write like an essay. And I don't think right now like ChatGPT has the ability to write efficiently. There are a lot of people that are going to argue with me on that. But like what you can do is you could use it to give, for example, like maybe give you like a writing prompt. And I know a lot of people do that. But of course, you can just like, there are ways you can already like generate writing prompts that are like unique. But it's definitely like something to experiment with. Like actually, one thing I did is I had it, you can generate, images. And I had it generate the like faces of my characters so I can better picture them. And I think that was a really good use of it. I didn't post the like, things it generated because I don't want to like is because it's so new, there's the risk that like it's stealing from an artist or it's taking too much inspiration from something else. But just using it personally to be able to help like inspire you is really, really cool. And I think you can also do it to like generate book covers. Again, like I'm a little worried that that could potentially be unethical at this point, but of course in the future it won't be. But
Mhm.
it's really good for like the inspiration of just like seeing what it could look like.
Yeah, yeah. ChatGPT has come a long way, especially beginning of last year was kind of very clunky, and then towards the end of 2023, it's actually made dramatic improvements. It's almost like an assistant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's going to be like intellectual property rights. There's going to be disinformation. But it kind of like what you were talking about, how you're using TikTok to scale your marketing and kind of ride these micro trends, and AI can actually help you scale that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what the younger generation comes up with. Next thing is, with success comes haters. So talking about, bullying, but I know you talk a lot about that through literature, and especially with social media, you have trolls and haters and all these losers. So how do you handle that?
So especially to begin, like on social media, there are a lot of people who are just gonna not like you for being you. For example, I have a lot of people comment on my post and they're like, "You didn't write that. You didn't write those books," and they'll like accuse you of all of this stuff. And really, the only thing you can do is just ignore it. And I tell that to so many people because basically every author I know has dealt with some kind of online troll or maybe a negative review that just is mean.
Yeah.
And really, I kind of like almost like laugh at it. That's kind of mean of me to say, but it's true, is you just have to like ignore it. And honestly, I feel kind of bad for the people that troll others online because often I think it just comes from a place of jealousy. And if you can understand that, then you can just kind of let it like just ignore it and just like let it happen. Sometimes if I find like I don't actually get like that many mean comments online, but if there are any, I just delete them. I don't need to see them. No one else needs to see them. That can just stay with the person who wrote it.
Hmm.
And then as for like in-person bullying, which I write a lot about, especially, with like in school, I've always found that writing has been really, really like cathartic for me and it's been really healing. And I think those words are just synonyms of each other, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always use it as a way to like cope and get through my issues. So being able to write about like my own experiences and like subtly incorporate them in my books has really, really helped me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I've had a podcast guest earlier today, and she was talking about the same thing. Like the haters, they come from a place of they haven't done what you've done. So, and then you look at them like 1 year later, and they're still doing the same thing. So they just go nowhere. Just like I said, I just kind of delete or just don't respond to the comments. I mean, it's very easy to
Yeah.
somebody. Towards the end of it, you've written various genres: science fiction, fantasy, historical fiction. And how do you navigate challenges in writing in different genres? What is your creative process, and like what drives your interest? How do I'm just curious how people use their creative process.
Well, I'd say every genre has its own struggle. For example, I wrote a high fantasy novel last year and I was just trying to like create and shape this like whole new world was so challenging. But when I was done, it was like beautiful. And then, for example, the book I'm writing right now is a very like high school, contemporary book that highlights a lot of like social issues. and really finding ways to balance all these issues and keep the characters still acting like teenagers, because they are. And I think that's a good, struggle for like the contemporary genre. But overall, they're not issues that prevent me from writing in the genres. And I think like I really want to write like everything. I really want to write like historical fiction at some point. I got to do more fantasy. It is a challenge. But and then in terms of my process, what happens is I'm always writing a book and I'm always editing a book. And it's a little hard for like to explain at first, but what I do is I have a first draft, and I have an idea for a book, and then I write that first draft. That usually takes around 1 to 3 months. It depends on whether or not I'm in school and how long it is and how much time I have and how like quickly I'm writing. But once I'm done with that first draft, I always set it aside, because I think if I jump back right into it and go right to the start, I'm going to miss a lot of errors that I might not notice. Whereas if I like take a break from the book, I'll like notice it a lot more, and I'll be able to really read with a new perspective. And then I'm also at the same time, I'm editing a book, and I do multiple rounds of editing. It can be very challenging. And I don't edit every single day. I edit on the days that I meet with my writing coach, because then we can really read through it and like look for plot holes. But I always do, a few rounds, and then she reads through it. And then sometimes I'll like go through and read it one more time if I like want to. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on how long the book is and how like, if there's anything I'm still like unsure about. And then I set a release date for the book, and I do all my marketing, and I go back and, I'm writing another book and I'm editing one, and it just keeps going.
Yeah. Because I like to evaluate risks. So, especially with these distribution channels, and, there was talk, I think last year, they're saying they're going to ban TikTok, or, a lot like my niece's university, you're not allowed to, access TikTok through the university Wi-Fi. So how are you hedging? Because you get a lot of views, and you market your book through TikTok, which is very powerful. Like you create a viral post, and it can just it can get millions of views and downloads, all of that. So what do you do if TikTok goes away or changes the algorithm or banned? What are you thinking about?
So I try to use TikTok as a tool, but I think definitely when I was in middle school promoting my books, I relied a lot more on TikTok than I do now. Uh-huh. So right now, what I'm doing is I make my posts on TikToks. I experiment with TikTok ads. But what I also try to do is I try to find other methods of marketing that aren't at risk of like being banned or it not working. And from there, I find that if I have multiple different outlets that are getting me book sales, for example, I do a lot of like newsletter promotions, and I've started experimenting with Amazon ads. Then what I find is that overall, TikTok brings in a lot of sales, but if I lose it, it won't be a like detrimental blow to my career, and I'll still get sales, and I'll find a way to overcome it.
And how are you leveraging communities? Because a lot of book creators, they leverage communities now. There's like Facebook groups, and there's Patreon. There's especially for writers, there's Substack, Medium, email newsletters, all of that.
What I've noticed is the biggest community that's really supportive and like interested in my books is other teen writers. So what I did, and I started a Discord server when I was in 8th grade actually, and I'm in 10th grade now. So it's been a long time. And what I do is it has around close to 1,000 members now, and it's all people who are like writers and teenagers, and they're very supportive. Of course, we buy each other's books and we promote each other's books, and that also definitely gets a lot more sales. As well, I try to be pretty active on my social medias. For example, I respond to as many comments on my platforms as I can, and I get a lot of DMs. I think I have like 30 message requests on TikTok right now. And I try my best to like answer as many questions as I can. Although a lot of the time there are questions that maybe I don't know how to answer, maybe like I don't have the time to. But if it's like a really like, creative question, then I'm going to respond to it. But if it's something that maybe like could be Googled or is not like an imminent question from someone, then I might have to wait to respond to it, because of course I can't spend all my time responding to people. But I do try to respond to as many people as I can. And if people comment asking for tips, I'll also like try to respond.
Yeah. And how do you balance social media, fame, celebrity, and safety, especially, such a young entrepreneur as yourself?
I have to be really careful online with like who I'm talking to, and like I try to, be aware of like, who's talking to me online, and if something they say make me uncomfortable, which has happened. I've had people say things and I'm like, I don't really like that.
Mhm.
And if that happens, I will often just block people. Sometimes there's like these like, random old dudes that'll message you and they'll be like, tell me about your books, and I'll respond. But then as soon as it starts to get like a little creepy, I'm just like, nope, I'm out. At the same time, I do occasionally do TikTok lives.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, those can be a little risky because anyone can join. And occasionally I've had some people like make me uncomfortable. And what you do is you just have to like restrict them. Or for example, when like I'm communicating with like, designers like for my book covers or anyone marketing related or podcasters, I try to keep the conversations like strictly professional. And that can be really tricky sometimes. But I really just try my best to like manage everything and make sure nothing is crossing any boundaries for me, because I am definitely someone who puts up like boundaries online because I understand the risks, and I know there are a lot of teenagers that maybe don't do that. And this extends to my communities too, where we have to make sure that no one under the age of 13 joins as per the Discord terms of service. And we also make sure that anyone over the age of 18 that joins the server is, talking appropriately. So really, I keep up boundaries and I try to keep myself safe, and then I keep those in my circle safe as well.
Yeah, fascinating. How can people find out more about you? Check out your books. Follow you on social media, etc.
Oh yeah, so my like everything is available on my website. My website is shantihershenson.com. That's ShantiHershenson.com. You can also find me on Instagram, which is at Shanti Hershenson. And then, of course, the platform that we've talked a lot about, TikTok, my username is just at Shanti Who Writes.
And for all the audience out there listening, Shanti, very young, successful entrepreneur, has the whole world ahead of her, and knows how to leverage technology, social media, trends, AI, and be sure to check out her books on Amazon and follow her on Twitter, TikTok, Insta. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you for having me.